Before I can do that, I'm going to need my little reading buddy to help me to read this, because this is a very important and powerful poem. So I'm going to need my little raven right here to help me to get into character. All right. It's going to stay there forever. So a lot of the times in poetry, it's hard to understand what the symbolism is and what the author is even talking about, and that's why it's important that I can kind of explain it to you. So as I'm reading, I'm going to let you know if there's any allusions, which would be a reference to another story, a person or a place or thing that has come before the story. I'm also going to let you know any definitions or any words that for vocabulary that I feel like you might not know, or just in case you thought it was something else, so that you know what he's talking about. All right, so this poem was written in 1845. Again, this is his most famous or most known poem. I want you to pay attention to how the mood and the tone change in the story. It's going to change a lot from being scared or stressed to being angry to being maybe happy for a little bit, but then it's going to go back to being very sad. So pay attention to the way that the character changes his mood. At the very end of the story, I'm going to bring this up again, I want you to think about the metaphor or the deeper symbolism that the actual raven is going to have. And again, there's going to be multiple allusions and specifically a lot of references to the Bible. So I will point those out to you as I read. First thing that we need to know is that we don't know who the narrator is. We just know that the narrator is not Edgar Allan Poe. It is just some man. We don't know his name. That's all that we know so far. Second thing we know is that Lenore is his girlfriend or his lover that has just passed away. And again, that's all that we know so far. Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered weak and weary over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore. While I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as of someone gently rapping at my chamber door. "'Tis some visitor," I muttered, tapping at my chamber door. Only this and nothing more. So now we have the setting. We know that this man is in his room or in a library in his house. It's nighttime. He's about to fall asleep, and he's surrounded by books. That would be the volume of forgotten lore. And he hears somebody knocking on the door, so he just thinks that it's some visitor or some guest. Distinctly I remember it was in the bleak December, and each separate dying ember wrought its ghost upon the floor. An ember is just a piece of coal or something in the fireplace. Eagerly I wished the morrow, vainly I had sought to borrow from the book surcase of sorrow, sorrow for the last Lenore, for the rare and radiant maiden whom the angels name Lenore, nameless here for evermore. And the silken sad uncertain rustling of each purple curtain thrilled me, filled me with fantastic terrors never felt before. So that now, to still the beating of my heart, I stood repeating, "'Tis some visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door, some late visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door. This is it and nothing more." So at this point, he's very nervous and anxious, and he's kind of just trying to make himself feel better by saying that someone's just knocking on his door that must be some visitor coming to his house. Presently, my soul grew stronger, hesitating then no longer. "Sir," said I, "or madam, truly your forgiveness I implore. But the fact is I was napping, and so gently you came rapping, and so faintly you came tapping at my chamber door, that I scarce was sure I heard you. Here I opened wide the door. Darkness there and nothing more." So when he opens the door, what's there? Darkness, right? There's nothing there. He opens the door and nobody is standing there, nobody is knocking on the door. Deep into that darkness peering, long I stood there wondering, fearing, doubting, dreaming dreams no mortal ever dared to dream before. But the silence was unbroken and the stillness gave no token, and the only word there spoken was the whispered word Lenore. This I whispered, and an echo murmured back the word Lenore, merely this and nothing more. So he opens the door, nobody's there, and he says Lenore, because he thinks that maybe that's who's coming back to him. Back into the chamber turning, all my soul within me burning. Soon again I heard a tapping, something louder than before. "Surely," said I, "surely that is something at my window lattice. Let me see, then, where threat is, and this mystery implore. Let my heart be still a moment, and this mystery implore. 'Tis the wind and nothing more." Again, he's trying to reassure himself because he's nervous that it's just the wind making that noise when he hears somebody knocking on the window. Open here I flung the shutter, when with many a flit and flutter, In there stepped a stately raven of the saintly days of yore. Not the least obeisance made he, not a minute stopped or stayed he, but with mien of lord or lady perched above my chamber door. Perched upon a bust of Pallas just above my chamber door, perched and sat and nothing more. Okay, so the word obeisance means to be respectful. So he's saying that this raven flew in, didn't pay him any respect, didn't even look at him. And he's saying he has the mien of a lord or a lady. So basically the raven is acting like it's royalty, or it's just acting full of itself. And it flies in, and we have our first illusion. And the illusion is the bust of Pallas. Pallas is the Greek goddess Athena. And if you know anything about mythology, Athena was the goddess of wisdom. So the narrator has a statue of the head of Athena, the goddess of wisdom. And this raven flies in his room and sits right on top of the head of this goddess that's supposed to represent knowledge. Then this ebony bird beguiling my sad fancy into smiling, by the grave and stern decorum of its countenance it wore. Ebony is just another word for black, and beguiling means somebody that is charming or trying to be sneaky. Though thy crest be shorn and shaven, thou, I said, art sure no craven. Craven is like a coward or somebody that is scared. Ghastly, grim, and ancient raven, wandering from the nightly shore, tell me what thy lordly name is on this night's Plutonian shore. That's another allusion. Plutonian, or Pluto, is a planet, but it is also a Greek god, which would be Hades, which is the god of the underworld. And so what is he asking the raven at this point? What did he just ask the raven?
What is his name?
Yes, thank you. So he asks the raven, this bird, and I don't know if you guys do this when you see birds, but I don't usually ask them what their name is. But he asks the raven, what's your name? And the raven says nevermore. So anytime we see nevermore, it just means like no more or never again. It's basically like saying no. So the raven says nevermore. Much I marveled this ungainly fowl to hear discourse so plainly. So he's thinking about how ungainly fowl is like a clumsy bird, and discourse is a word, or saying words. So he's wondering how this clumsy, like simple bird can speak so eloquently. Though its answer little meaning, little relevancy bore, for we cannot help agreeing that no living human being ever yet was blessed with seeing bird above his chamber door, bird or beast upon the sculpted bust above his chamber door, with such a name as nevermore. But the raven, sitting lonely on the placid bust, spoke only that one word, as if his soul in that one word he did outpour. Nothing farther than he uttered, not a feather than he fluttered, till I scarcely more than muttered, other friends have flown before. On the morrow he will leave me, as my hopes have flown before. Then the bird said, nevermore. So now the narrator is speaking out loud, and he's saying, a lot of people have abandoned me, my friends have left me, so this bird's going to leave tomorrow. And the bird says, nevermore. Startled at the stillness broken by reply so aptly spoken, doubtless, said I, what it utters is its only stock and store. Caught from some unhappy master whose unmerciful disaster followed faster, till his song one burden bore, till the dirges of his hope that melancholy burden bore, of nevermore. Dirges is when somebody dies and you have to mourn them, and melancholy is when you're very sad or upset. But the raven, still beguiling all my sad soul into smiling, beguiling is charming or tricking somebody to do something. Straight, I wheeled a cushioned seat in front of bird and bust and door. Then, upon the velvet sinking, I betook myself to linking fancy unto fancy, thinking what this ominous bird of yore, ominous is something that's evil, what this grim, ungainly, ghastly, gaunt, and ominous bird of yore meant in croaking nevermore. So he has a chair, right, just like you would in a room, and he just takes the chair and he puts it right in front of the door, and he sits down, and he's just staring up at the raven, because now he's interested and he's confused about what the bird's even talking about. So he just takes a chair and he sits down right in front of his door, and he's going to keep asking the bird questions. This I sat engaged in guessing, but no syllable expressing to the fowl whose fiery eyes now burned into my bosom's core. This and more I sat divining in my head and ease reclining on the cushion's velvet lining that the lamplight gloated over, but whose velvet violet lining in the lamplighting gloated over. She shall pass, nevermore. So who is the she do you think he's talking about now?
Is it Lenore?
Yes. So at this point, the narrator starts to go into kind of like a vision or a hallucination. He's still awake, but he starts to go into like a little bit of a hallucination that reminds him of Lenore. Then methought the air grew denser, perfumed from an unseen censer. A censer is like in church, that container that has incense or the smoke that smells like perfume that they shake a lot. So he's seeing and smelling the smoke. And it says that it was swung by seraphim, so he's seeing angels now, whose footfalls tinkled on the tufted floor. Wretch, I cried, thy God hath lent thee. By these angels he hath sent thee. Respite, respite, and nepenthe from thy memories of Lenore. Quaff, oh quaff, this kind nepenthe, and forget this lost Lenore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. A nepenthe is something that is going to help you to forget something else. So he has this vision and he starts to think about Lenore. The perfume smells like her. He sees angels. And now he's saying, oh, I guess you're sent from heaven, but I really don't want to think about Lenore anymore. So I don't want to think about her ever again. Take her out of my mind and my head. And the raven says, nevermore. Like, you're never going to be able to forget her. So this is when his mood starts to change. You're going to see him start to be angry and he's going to start yelling at the bird. Prophet, said I, thing of evil, prophet still, if bird or devil, whether tempter sent or whether tempest tossed thee here ashore. Desolate, yet all undaunted, on this desert land enchanted, on this home by horror haunted, tell me truly, I implore, is there balm in Gilead? Tell me, I implore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. So this is another Bible allusion or another Bible reference. And Gilead was just a place in the Bible to say, is there a balm in Gilead? A balm is like lip balm, right? That's supposed to heal your lips if they're chapped. Balm in Gilead was basically something that you could never find. It was like something that could heal all wounds and heal everything. So he's asking the raven, is there any way to heal my soul? Is there any way that I'm going to be healed from this? And the raven says, nevermore. So again, we have some repetition. Prophet, said I, thing of evil, prophet still, if bird or devil. By that heaven that bends above us, by that God we both adore. Tell this soul, with sorrow laden, if within the distant Aidenn, it shall clasp a sainted maiden, whom the angels name Lenore. So when it says Aidenn, it's actually referencing Eden, like the Garden of Eden. It's another Bible reference. Clasp a rare and radiant maiden, whom the angels name Lenore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Okay, so this part of the story, he's asking the raven if he's a prophet and if he knows everything. He's basically asking if Lenore, because she's dead, if she is in heaven right now. And the raven says no. So now he's very mad because he loved her and he thinks he's lying now, and he's just really upset by him even saying that she's not in heaven. Be that word our sign of parting, bird or fiend, I shrieked upstarting. Get thee back into the tempest and the night's Plutonian shore. So at this point, he's telling him, like, you better go back downstairs where you belong. Leave no black plume as a token of thy lie thou soul hath spoken. Leave my loneliness unbroken. Quit the bust above my door. So now he's telling him to leave because he's upset. Take thy beak from out my heart, and take thy form from off my door. Quoth the raven, nevermore. So obviously the raven doesn't actually have his physical beak in his heart, but he's basically saying, like, you're hurting my heart and you're breaking my heart and you need to leave because you're making me upset and I just want to be lonely and miserable by myself. So you need to leave. So I'm going to read the last stanza. And again, I want you to be focusing on what bigger symbolism the raven will have. So what the symbol of the raven is supposed to be in this story. And the raven, never flitting, still is sitting on the pallid bust of Pallas just above my chamber door. And his eyes have all the seeing of a demon's that is dreaming, and the lamplight over him streaming throws his shadows on the floor. And my soul from out that shadow that lies floating on the floor shall be lifted nevermore. All right, so what do you think the symbolism is of the raven? If he's saying at the very end that the raven is still above his door and he's never going to leave, what could the raven be symbolic of? Okay, so there's technically multiple answers for this question. A lot of people think that it's like his grief, right? Like mourning over Lenore. So it could be like he's never going to get over her. He'll never stop thinking about her. He'll never be happy again, basically. The main symbolism is that the raven is a symbol of the narrator's depression. So it's like his own sadness and depression is never going to leave him. The raven's never going to leave him. His depression will never leave him. And it's going to be there forever, which is a very sad mood at the end of this story. And then again, the main message is that he will never more be happy again after he's lost Lenore. He's never going to be able to stop thinking about her or about the situation. And again, the raven was never physically there. It was either a dream or a hallucination or him really going crazy with the grief that he's experienced. I want you to think about now what I asked you in the very beginning when we were talking about why Edgar Allan Poe wanted to write this story. What do you think his motivation could be to write this story? All right, so a lot of you are writing basically the same thing. So right before he wrote The Raven, in real life, Edgar Allan Poe's wife, Virginia, just died. So she just passed away. Remember that his mother, both of his mothers, his adoptive and birth mother, both died. And his wife just died. So a lot of people think that Lenore is actually represented by Virginia. A lot of people think that the motivation was because this was him dealing with his feelings and expressing himself. And he probably also knew that a lot of people were dying at that time from tuberculosis, so he probably wanted to show somehow like how he was feeling and how he was dealing with the situation, even though it's kind of sad. But it is kind of sweet, I guess, if you think about it, because he's kind of just like Lenore or his wife will always be with him forever. If you don't think about the depression part, if you just think about like remembering someone or having someone in your mind, he's basically saying that even though she passed away, she'll always be with me somehow. All right, we're going to say bye to the bird. He's going to fly away.